From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter, where Jon Snow's resting, what's west of Westeros, and the shadows in the east, sometimes those in Mordor as well. And don't forget the world of Willow. This is Casterly Talk. I'm Kit Napzok. We are live today on the YouTube side, but you might be listening to this on the podcast side, and we are happy to have you no matter how you take us in. It's been a lot of fun watching the Willow coverage led by this man, my co-host today, the one and only, that Alden Diaz. What's up, my friend?
Hello. Yes, returning from Tirasleen and heading back into Westeros, a place decidedly less fun and warm and welcoming, but I do miss it. I miss Westeros.
How many Metallica covers are in Westeros is the question we have to ask ourselves.
Not enough. Although I will say, I love the Metallica moment, and I would remind everyone of the Bear and the Maiden Fair that even Game of Thrones was not above throwing a pop cover in.
You have
a rock cover in.
Yeah. Who was that? Was that the Hold Steady? I think did that one there, and then the National, of course, doing the Rance of Castamere. Florence Machine, Florence doing Jenny Oldstones. I love it. I love it. I don't want to turn this into Willow Talk. You and Nikki have been doing a great job. You got some great guests lined up for the episodes coming in the next couple weeks here. I'm a rock DJ. I love weird kind of bizarre covers of metal songs, and I love slower versions done with an acoustic guitar. I love it. I think it adds to the whimsy of Willow. So you tell the world, Alden. That's what I think.
I'm going to pass those comments along. It has been controversial, but I'm here for it. I think that if we're going to do these shows, we're going to do these fantasy shows, they have to carve out an identity. Rings of Power season finale ended with an original song by, who did that?
Was it Fiona Apple? No,
it's Fiona Apple. It's Fiona Apple. That's right. Enya did the movies. She was in the Jackson
movies, and then you had Neil Finn doing Nick Mountain, and then Annie Lennox, of course, in there as well. So I love it. I love it. So here's why we're here today. We are live on YouTube. We're having some fun. I haven't been on the channel here in a couple weeks, so I wanted to show my face on the YouTube side. What a thrill for all of you, and get my voice out there. But really, we had the Game of Thrones convention this weekend. We did not attend. A lot going on in life right now, and I think that convention needs some work to get the word out. I have some thoughts on that, but Alden, emerging from that was some Jon Snow thoughts. There was a tweet that went out yesterday that I just kind of saw in passing and went, I text you, go, look what we got here. And you said, well, consider this, which is also how information gets spread so fast when it's sometimes not correct. So that's why, Alden, we're here to talk a little Jon Snow, sir. Yes,
a character near and dear to my heart, somebody that I think about more than I think about some of my actual family and friends. And I'm glad that this convention, low key as it may be, and it was sort of a weird unrolling, nothing bad. It wasn't disorganized or anything. It was just like, for something this massive, it was like, hey, there was a Game of Thrones con with like lead characters, and it was kind of under discussed. But there were some great insights coming out from Kit Harrington, from Patty Considine. You had some fun cast pairings from both shows, like we got to see Joffrey and Aegon 2 together, like the two despised kings. We got to see Steve Toussaint was on a panel. Like it seemed like a good time.
I saw that. I love Jack Gleason and his like trucker mustache he had going on there. He looked like he was in a 70s Southern California rock band.
Right.
I loved all that. Yeah, and look, I want to talk positively about the convention. I have never attended Con of Thrones, which was kind of an unofficial convention. I think it makes a lot of sense for the HBO family, and I see in chat here, George Mitchell brought up a good question. The real question is will HBO be a thing in 2025? Stay tuned for that or whatever's going on over there. Some troubling things on the business side. But I think Game of Thrones will be sick. But anyways, not to digress too much, I think it's great that they have an official convention. It makes a lot of sense. You and I are big fans of Star Wars Celebration, obviously. I'll see you all in London. But I just think this is the first year out. They had it delayed a couple years because of COVID, and it needs to be bigger and better, and it can be. Meaning, like you said, it was well done. Everyone who went seemed to have a great time, but not a lot of podcasts get invited to cover it, which is how you get that press exchange to get the word out. The fans know it's a place to be. So, Alden, we're positive about it, but we want to see it bigger and better.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where it's sort of like, because so many of our conventions are institutions. Like Star Trek has I think it has a couple, and it has like the Mission one, which was unfortunately just delayed, and they've been in Vegas, and Celebration's an institution, San Diego's an institution, New York's an institution. These are all at their final forms, and if they ever get tweaked, it's only a little bit. Like this year we're doing a Lightspeed line, or this year we're doing this. A ground up convention for something massive is something that we haven't really seen in a while, and we have to sort of put it in perspective. Like those first Star Wars celebrations were, hey, we're gonna do a random panel with every Boba Fett that's alive, like, and just put them all together. And I think that this had some of that old school con energy. I heard from a friend named Edgar from the Where Heartbreak Feels Good podcast that he was on the ground, on the scene the entire weekend, got to ask some audience questions, and he said it was surprisingly very calm. You could just reserve a seat. You could just walk in wherever. So yeah,
I agree with that. It's like San Diego when Charles Lippincott is promoting Star Wars. It's a couple of card tables and some classic nerds trying to figure out what that sci-fi movie's about. So I love that. Yeah, I think it's only going to get bigger and better. And one of the things, we are so used to news emerging from cons. You see the word con, Comic-Con San Diego, New York, whatever, Wizard World for a while, Dragon Con, that's never been associated with news, more drinking. But then you see con and you just expect news. And we were you and I were on call to see if there's going to be anything official about this Jon Snow sequel series or any kind of big news. Not a lot of big news emerged, but we do want to dive into this Jon Snow the thing here with some thoughts about it. But Alden, this will start with that kind of weird tweet from HBO, right?
Yeah, so it was an interesting situation because people knew the con was coming up. They had marketed it with a handful of guests, and some of them were some of the marquee headlining characters. Kit Harrington was one of the first out of the gate that was confirmed. Later, they added Patty and some of the other leads from House of the Dragon. But they had Kit lined up. And then, you can go back. We covered it here on Casterly Talk when it was just a James Hibberd report. And then a day or two later, George R. R. Martin himself is like, yes, it is in development. The working title is Snow. This did happen. And then HBO very randomly, it seemed suspicious, put up the Journey of Jon Snow video on all over their channels and socials, which served as like a catch up and stuff, or just like a look back at his arc, which felt like, and again, maybe this is just nerd training from other things. It's like, oh, they're prepping us. They're getting us in the mood for John. And Kit's going. He has his own panel. And it just felt like something was going to happen. But it's not like it was a broken promise. It's just that's the way the nerd world is.
No, absolutely. Again, we are conditioned to think that, right? We're conditioned to just be, con panel, Kit showing up. There's going to be some news. And so, it could lead to disappointment, which is natural, but also not the con's fault, not HBO's fault. I want to address something too. This is we get live. We're here live on YouTube. If you got a question, we're gonna talk about Jon Snow. But if anything pops to your mind, we'd love to kind of answer it here. Gaz Nottingham writes that the actor who played Didger Mero in Andor, Denise Goff, mentioned in an interview that she had shot a Game of Thrones pilot, wasn't picked up. Any ideas what that would have been? She was in Blood Moon, which was the Naomi Watts led one. So hey, there you go. That didn't go, but she's absolutely killing it. Kind of literally with Didger Mero. So
yeah, she's fantastic. And I knew about Naomi Watts. I believe there was somebody else in that I was a fan of, but I can't quite recall. But now that I've seen Andor, I'm extra curious about the Blood Moon pilot. That we should note for viewers, even George R. R. Martin has never seen it, at least as of his last comment on it.
And again, HBO Max, WB, there's a lot of business going on. Who knows what we'll be able to see and what George R. Martin could even see. That was that.
When it all burns down, he can run in and grab the Blood Moon tape when no one's looking.
There's some big juicy comments that Kit Harrington had about Jon Snow as the man who played that character for so many years. So we want to get to that, but before we do that, let's start maybe with the tweet. I don't have it in front of me from, it was like Anywhere Plus, but this idea of that, it's definitely happening. Now you said off air, great thing. It's kind of unofficially official, right?
It is unofficially official is what I would use to describe it, because it's like saying something's in development. It reminds me, not to make it a Star Wars podcast, although the two of us have Star Wars podcasts, the whole idea of like Sean Levy, right, is a great example. Someone in the trades reports Sean Levy is in talks to develop a Star Wars. Then Sean Levy tweets, yes, I am. That still doesn't count as official. And so it's like Snow was reported on by Hibbard, who has a great relationship.
Yep.
Snow was then confirmed to be in development by George. That's George himself. So we know it exists, at least in ideas phasing. What IndieWire Plus, and that's an important part of this, IndieWire Plus tweeted was that it's in pre-production, that you're going to have Jon and Tormund, that it's this and this and this. It's coming out 2025. Like they were going hard on the details. And I sort of was like, well, I don't know what IndieWire Plus is. So I looked into it, couldn't really see if there was an official connection. They're not verified, although verification is
I never was, so I'm not paying $8 to
no. And now there's multicolor verification. It's like a Power Ranger badge. I don't even know. But
I know who I am.
Somebody responded, said, where is this info coming from? And this account said, IndieWire and Deadline got out of a fan convention that just ended. However, all fans were specifically asked to not ask questions about this. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. So this is all very vague. So it's like reporting. It almost feels like we see this a lot sort of with like leaks and scoops culture, where it's like you take an easy shot and then you could say you were right later. Like saying Jon and Tormund are going to be in this thing is like, okay, yeah, I would have assumed that.
It's like, that's like saying I'm going to drink at my next stand-up gig. It's a good guess. And even the release date of 2025 is one of those safe bet kind of guesses. And we're not here to say that anyone behind that tweet was guessing. This is just, trace, try to find other spots in it, and nothing else emerged. So
it wasn't in any, like there was no Hibbard follow-up. There was no EW or THR Variety or Deadline. And that's not to say that people that are not legacy trades, I don't know how to classify them, younger publications, it's not to say they can't be right. They have been. But you got to follow sort of the trusted sources, which Martin has even said. He has laid out, this is someone I trust, this is someone I don't, this is someone who does the journalistic work, this is someone who doesn't. But we can't avoid the fact that it is a show that we knew existed. So when Kit does take to the mic during the weekend, you are reading between everything he says.
You absolutely have to read between the lines. Yeah, and we want to clarify too. George R. R. Martin said, it's a thing. Kit's brought his showrunners and his team to it. They're great. Can't say anything, but in that George way, says a lot, which is what he's apt to do. I want to get to Kit's comments, because we get a great live comment here from Douglas Dubois saying, hey, does anyone even have an inkling about what the show, Jon Snow show, will be about? I'm so intrigued. It seems like they have a direction they want to go. I'm just too dense to predict. So we're going to get to that here in a second. But Alden, there's reason to be excited before we get to Kit's comments. George Mitchell says it's a non-apologetic Jon Snow stan. Can't wait to see what's next for the prince who was promised. You have to imagine we'll see Queen Sansa and or King Bran too. So before we get to Kit's comments, let's kind of maybe even remix some of you and I's thoughts on what we think this show could be, what we want, what we maybe predict thematically, which leads into some Kit stuff. But I'm with George here. It'd be hard not to at least hear those names during this story.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about the context creatively for this, you have the thing that excites me about it is the fact that George R. R. Martin is excited about it, because you have a guy who watched his story, and we'll never ever get the 100%, maybe not until Benioff and Weiss are elderly and there's a tell-all book will we get the truth of the truth of the truth, or as much of the truth as we can get. We'll never know exactly how he feels about season 8. We won't know what's his and what wasn't until we get 2 more books. So all that aside, what's interesting is that you have Kit Harrington pitching him a sequel to the ending that is not his official ending, but is something that he liked enough to say, yes, that's what would happen. And that is so creatively intriguing, because it's like George famously has been like, I think we should have gone to 12, 13, 14 seasons. He got less involved. He stopped writing a teleplay during, after season 4 or 5. So it's like, he clearly was a little distant, but then your lead actor says, well, I think this is what happens next. And you agree with him. And that's fascinating, because that implies to me that whatever Kit pitched might work potentially with show Jon and book Jon. And so there's that type of stuff. But in terms of in lore and fun nerd stuff, I mean, I can't help but go back to what one of your boys, Sir Alistair, said, like, but right before he died, like, you'll be fighting their battles forever. If if called upon by one of his siblings, of course he'll return. Of course he would.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And Ranger Donald adds here, we all know whose name will cast the biggest shadow all over the show, even though she's not in it at all. Of course, Amelia Clark is like, yeah, John or Kit told me, John himself, Kit told me at Christmas last year. It's all good. I know it's real. And I'm not in it. And I'm not surprised by that. But one of the things I'd put out there before that, to bring in like Queen Sansa, bring in the king who has broken their brand. This idea that, Bran's going to go find Drogon, or at least that's part of what maybe what he wants to do. Tyrion, your punishment is won this whole business. I'm out of here. I'm going to take a rocket to Mars. And I love that the one person who would have that kind of connection, and the one way to maybe pull him back in, I keep trying to get out, but they pull him back in, is Kit on as Jon Snow on a search for Drogon, or just trying to find it out. And again, we'll get to Kit's comments here in a second. It all kind of lines up thematically in my head of where he would be and what he might want to correct or change, or at least come to terms with post A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation because I think that, season 8 being as controversial as it was, you will hear a whole spectrum of opinions. And one that you hear a lot is, I really didn't like anything that they did except for the 3 Stark kids. I like the Stark kids endings. You hear that a lot. And I think that Jon in particular returning to the True North, which Tormund had sort of foreshadowed, like, you've got too much of the True North in you. You're not a kneeler anymore. That's where the first love of his life, he later to rest up there. Like, that's him returning, whether he's king beyond the wall officially or whether or not he's just wants to be with them is ambiguous. Ghost up there as well. It feels like he was headed toward a period, not of isolation because he's got a people, but of reflection and everything, and to wonder where he is mentally after doing what he was convinced by Tyrion was right to a degree. But even Tyrion was like, ask me again in 10 years. Right. Is this the answer? Is this that? Is this Jon showing up at King's Landing to hand Tyrion and saying we did it wrong? I don't know.
I was just gonna think, like, that's the previous on. You kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi had the previous on, and it was just the prequels. On previous on, you just do a supercut of 8 seasons and have Tyrion say, "Ask me again in 10 years," and Jon shows up 10 years later to go, "I have an answer." There's a lot of that stuff there too. Yeah, and again, you and I really love a lot of things put forth in season 8, season 7. We understand problems. We have some problems ourselves, quibbles, but overall, just really think they hit the show the nail on the head with themes that they were building. And one of them for me is big in season 3 with Jon Snow. I'm out here to be a hero, and Mance Rayder calling his bluff and kind of telling the hard truth of, oh, I get it. You want to be a hero. And Jon has to redefine that for himself. So I love where he ends, but I love these big questions. And a lot of people in chat even asking stuff about, hey, White Walkers, is there another ice baby out there? Is that all wrapped up? So to get into some of that stuff before, again, I keep teasing Kit's comments because I really love his comments here. Things about White Walkers, things that Tormund makes a lot of sense. Some of the characters we already know and love, Sam showing up, Bran, Sansa, all that stuff. Hey, Maisie Williams, throw her back in there doing some Arya the way she wants to do it. I would love all that. Would you be okay with that, Alden, if it is more of a direct continuation, or do you like a time jump? Do you like it going in an entire different direction? Would you feel, hey, I'm kind of feeling the loss of a Tyrion, or even Bronn shows up? Who knows? Or you're this far out from it. Where does your heart go?
Yeah, I think my gut instinct is that I don't personally, if I'm in the room, I would caution everyone. I would say we're not doing Game of Thrones season 9. That's the thing. We're not doing season 9, and I would say whoever's show running this, you're coming off of in the same way that even though it was a prequel, Ryan Condal and them, like, they knew, like, we're coming off of this iconic thing, controversial as it may be, et cetera, et cetera. I would want them to approach it with the same mentality and lean in, like, just season 8 happened. That's our foundation. We have to be in our creative bubble and say, this is what we're working with. Now, does it need to be Game of Thrones season 9? No. Would I be fine with a time jump? Absolutely. But do I want some returning faces? Yes, because Jon is a character that I think embodies something that I like in my heroes, which is that they are forged by many people. He is Ned Stark's son, as much as he's Jeor Mormont's protege, as much as he's Mance Rayder's heir, as much as he's Rhaegar's literal son, as much as he's Ygritte and Dany's lover at different times. Like, he's Sam's best friend. All of those roles that he fulfills are so important that if he were to come south ever for any reason again, whether that was for a specific mission or a war or Sansa's reign being threatened, whatever it was, you would expect him to call upon a Grand Maester Samuel Tarly or people like that. So I don't need it to be the continuation of like if the Ice Baby, whatever, I wouldn't mind. It's all about execution.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the mythological threat that we wrapped at Winterfell needs to be unpacked again. It could be the result of that sort of like First Order Empire. Like things linger. But I don't need it to be surprise season 8 was not the end. I don't need that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't imagine that even George, HBO, anyone would just buy into that right away. So again, we're totally speculating and having fun doing it, but not holding any of these ideas and thoughts. That's why I like, as much as I love kind of this thing I keep saying of, hey, let's go search for Drogon. That's almost an immediate pickup. I do like a little time. I do want to see him I want to see what's in the north, what's going on, who's around him, a bunch of new characters to dive into up there. And yes, I would absolutely, it would be a no-brainer to have Tormund. Tormund and Jon is a comedy duo indeed. So that would make a lot of sense. But the idea of Jon going east, I think that's why I fixate a little bit on the search for Drogon, because it would take him out of that. There's no reason to expect that this pitch would be an entire show set in the Great White North up there. But how far can Jon go? Is it past the lands of always winter? Is it to Asshai? Is it to go see the rest of this world? He's just a Westeros boy, right? He's just a local.
Yeah.
Let's go see the world. And as far as a big conflict, a big bad, I don't have that right now. And that's not the pressure I have in pitching this show. I'm just sitting here as a fan. I would like to see Jon go abroad.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to note too that Game of Thrones, The Song of Ice and Fire, that core story is in such a post-magic world, and whether you're someone that loves the Maesters versus magic theory, or that just looks at it literally with the dying of the dragons, there's all this stuff. This is post-magic, but it's important, I think. And if I was in the room, again, I'm not. No one's paying me to do that, and if I was, I wouldn't be here talking about it. Jon Snow is one of the last sort of vessels of magic. It's something that we forget, is that he has died and has risen again. And what is a second life like for one of these characters? And we've seen that hinted at with someone like Beric, that less of you comes back every time, and that there is sort of a price, and like maybe it's not there's a big magical villain with ice powers that I'm going to fight this time, but the battle is internal while I try to deal with something. And then, just on a real world fun note, if I'm Kit, I would imagine, this is my idea for the show, and I will not be doing all of those snow shoots. Take me tropical. Take me somewhere else.
David McKay, aka Chat on 19, says in chat, given how Kit's talked about Northern Ireland, I would not be surprised if he wanted a Jon Snow to go abroad as well. Yeah, maybe he's like, you know what? Jon Snow needs to go to the beach. He just needs to hang out at the beach here. Andy Hodges suggests if they do decide to do a young Griff continuation, I would like to actually get to see those war elephants. Yeah, just have Cersei's quote hanging above that. I wanted those elephants. Great stuff here. All right, we're not doing a super long show today, so let's get to those Kit Harrington comments. All right, Alden, pick some stuff that you want. I got the article up. As always, we want to shout out, I'll say friends that we don't really know them, are officially affiliated with them, but I enjoy always going to winteriscoming.net. And Daniel Roman, you can follow him at Roman Writing, put together a good summary and some good thoughts on Game of Thrones official fan convention and the panel that Kit was on, or the panels that Kit was on, and some great Jon Snow thoughts. So check them out. We're all part of the Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire ecosystem. Alden, what do you got? Where you go?
Yeah, there's a comment here that I wanted to address. Of course, a lot of people wanted his thoughts on the ending, and everybody seemed to have asked in really chill ways. We'll touch on this a little bit. Our friend Edgar that I mentioned, he asked Kit what he feels Ned Stark would have thought of Jon's final decision to kill Dany, in terms of like how he grew up knowing about the Kingslayer and then sort of becomes the Queenslayer. And Kit gave a great answer in terms of that he thinks Ned would have disapproved. And so he's a lot of his questions were about Jon's mental state and about hypotheticals and what he thinks. But this is the interesting thing here that I loved. I'm quoting this out of the Entertainment Weekly write-up. There's tons of write-ups of the panel. It says he began speaking about the drama in 2019 with Jon killing Daenerys and banished to live out his days on the wall in the north. This is where Kit says, quote, "I think if you asked him, he would have felt he got off lightly," Kit said. "At the end of the show, when we find him in that cell, he's prepared to be beheaded and he wants to be. He's done. The fact that he goes to the wall is the greatest gift and also the greatest curse." He continued, quote, "He's got to go back up to the place with all this history and live out his life thinking about how he killed Dany, and live out his life thinking about Ygritte dying in his arms, and live out his life thinking about how he hung Ollie, and live out his life thinking about all of his trauma. And that," Harington paused before a brief moment, "that's interesting," he coyly emphasized.
First of all, I'm disappointed that Kit doesn't think Jon Snow would be remorseful over Alistair Thorne. It just breaks my heart.
He thought about him for a moment and said, shame. It's the hot fuzz. Shame.
Greater good. Yarp. All right. That is some juicy stuff, Alden. Yeah, there's so much to pull out of that there. And I love, actors put so much into these characters. Sometimes their thoughts and ideas about the characters are a little wild. See anything Mark Hamill thinks about Luke Skywalker, good and bad. He's got some thoughts. Some you might not actually agree with if you heard the full uncut version of some of his thoughts. But I really like Kit as thinking as a producer as well, which is what he would be on this series. He's thought long and hard about what this character went through. He spent a lot of time with the character. In fact, had some kind of his own trauma playing the character, which was well documented. He had to kind of take a good mental health time out to deal with some stuff. So this character stayed with him. The shoots and all the experience stayed with him, both good and bad. So Alden, what do you pull out of this first?
I think that the idea of being guilt-ridden is so cyclical, and it's so interesting in terms of, we mentioned Ned in terms of my friend Edgar's question, like,
yeah,
the honor and dishonor having to live within one person and who gets to define that, right? Because it's like, if Jon is wrestling with these questions about Ygritte and Ollie and ultimately Daenerys and all these things, it's like he's got to wrestle, I think, with having done the right thing, maybe in the grand picture, but also maybe societally the wrong things, because it was regicide, but also Daenerys was a foreign conqueror. So was it not? Like, there's all these ins and outs, and I think he would reflect a lot on sort of the nuances of those two things, which Tyrion has also done. And it's why Tyrion didn't have an answer, because at the end of the day, he has to know, I did save lives. I did put a stop to immediate destruction that I witnessed, but also I knew the truth of this person. I knew her in ways that other people didn't. I think there's a lot of somberness that comes with these questions. And, you talked about Mark Hamill, like, is this Jon and his Last Jedi era of, I did legendary things, but I also am now paying for them? It's a hard thing, because that's been Game of Thrones since the beginning of the original story. It's like, Ned, honor, 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 honor. But you also helped destroy the Targaryen dynasty. You were a rebel. You helped the usurper, but you judged Jaime for a stab in the back. Like, that sliding spectrum of what's right and wrong is so part of what George does in this world.
Yeah. I love what you said. You throw in the question of honor with Jaime Lannister. Sir, he is a knight. Still give him that of that season 1 kind of Ned versus Jaime. What we thought as an audience, whether it's book or show, doesn't matter. Them kind of like, you have an opinion of one, and Ned is still, I think, pure of heart and remains so. But that unravels a little bit more. I love the idea that we could dive into. And Andy Hodges had a great comment here. If it was 4 seasons of Jon being sad and working through his trauma, grief, and the cold to find joy again with minimal action scenes, I'd also be super here for that. We know that the show wouldn't be that, but I would be, in a way, jokes aside, I kind of would like to see that explored, because you get into a lot of things about self-forgiveness, the honor that you're talking about, weighing your actions, what was a hero, what wasn't heroic, but also I think looking back on the world itself, one of my big dangling kind of threads, thematic threads on Dany. One of the ones I get a lot of debates with people about is I don't know if the show nailed it perfectly in season 8. A lot of people will yell at me they didn't. But I really love the choice, and I love getting there, and I even love the speed of it, because it was about the journey there that, starting in season 3 particularly, she decides to use her power for good, and the world's like, F you, constantly saying, we're not gonna let you do this, lady, foreigner, all these things you said. And does Jon have that too? And could you work through that? Does the realm have any thoughts on that? He's away from it. How does he reflect on that? How does he maybe go about changing that, especially north of the wall, where it's a little bit more truly free, as Tormund would probably tell you? So those are big things. That's not a lot of action, a lot of campfire scenes, but I think that's where the show can build from, or could build from, where the character goes forward.
Absolutely. And you look at Jon's origins, much like Dany's, like they were both born of this cataclysmic time, this Robert's Rebellion era, and it's hung over them. And Jon, it's at the end of the show, not the literal end, but like the tail end of the show, that he finds out the truth about his parentage and everything. And there's a war, and there's another battle, and like he doesn't get time to really deal with that in the moment. But you've got to wonder how he has processed his own deeds, in terms of the fact that he is his very existence comes from the combination of honor and dishonor, truth and lie, falsehood, love, broken. Like, his real father Rhaegar chose love, over duty, which is a huge thing for him, and that caused what it caused. And then his adoptive father, actual uncle Ned, is the most honorable man, but raised him under a lie even that his family was lied to, the entire world. Ned helped install the usurper Robert, but then protected this baby who was a Targaryen from the usurper Robert. Jon is born of contradictions, and I think that he was born, bred, and crafted and forged under contradictions, and he has a lot hanging over him.
I love that as for like an ESPN 30 for 30 doc on Jon Snow. What if I told you one kid was born under contradictions?
Yeah.
That'd be fun to explore. A lot of stuff. Eric Monroe's checking in here. Our good buddy Aaron, Eric, Susie. Hi, everyone. I'm excited for Jon Snow show, but I also agree with Alden. I don't need it to be GOT season 2. Our friend from the Imperial Senate podcast, Charles Worthington Ashby Mountbatten III. That's not his real name, but I'm excited, Charlie, to finally get to have a pint with you in London in April. I would love some magical way of Jon being able to discuss these issues with ghosts of the past, maybe Targaryen dreams. Imagine Jon talking to Viserys first. You know what? After seeing those two performers side by side at the convention this week, that's all I want. And give
Motorhead.
me that Jon Snow Motorhead.
Lemmy Snow. Jon Kilvis. He was rocking it. I'm so glad that him and Patty got to meet. Somebody that knows the lore way better than me, tell me how many generations removed he is as a great grandpa. Especially with incest, it makes it complicated. I tried to do the what is Rhaenyra to Dany once, and I had to read a whole article, and I think she's like 16th great grandmother or something like that. But yeah, I mean, dragon dreams, like leaning into that again, the Drogon of it all. Like Drogon and Jon have some cute moments, they have some funny moments, like when they're making out and Drogon's just looking at him, like, but they also have, the dragons have a higher level of sentience in a certain way, much like direwolves. Like they're able to understand and form relationships. And it's important to note, like, Drogon witnessed what went down, burned the throne, and then didn't turn on Jon, though. He left, and Drogon in that moment, this weapon of mass destruction, did choose peace. And what moment is there left for them? And where is he going? And why is Bran interested? These are very, nerd world, like, we must have an answer. And like, I don't necessarily feel that way, but it is, there's a lot hanging over everything, especially with the lay of the land. I mean, we got to keep in mind where, Kit is a few years older now. They could always age him up if they wanted to. They could put some gray in his beard. Like, they could do anything with television. But the capital is also still devastated. Like, the Red Keep is devastated. The North is now independent. Like, there's so much that you can lean into in terms of the difference in the world building, that while you're doing that, why not have Jon, like, this show starts with Jon's first dragon dream, And
Mhm.
and maybe it's like now I'm just irresponsibly speculating, but like you didn't have them when you were a kid because you didn't know you were a Targaryen, and now you do, and
Yeah,
here you
open
go.
up. I mean, what do you about, and we'll get back to some kids' comments here, but what do you think about this identity? You mentioned a lot of things that he is, the Targaryen thing hanging over him. Yeah, he kind of, in a sense, leaves the name behind and heads north of the wall, which wasn't necessarily, it was, I think, partly, like Kit says, is a blessing and a curse, a gift and a curse. But he's got that hanging over him. Does he try to reattach himself to that identity, discover more about that identity, learn to be a Targaryen? Do you want that to factor in at all? I mean, it definitely would hang over him, but could that be part of it too? That the story almost ends more Targaryens. I know some people want different family names, but that would be an interesting thread for me, especially from House of the Dragon season 1 to where we might go.
Yeah, I would like them to deal with it for sure, even if it is by addressing or doubling down or having him explain, in dialogue or with a new relationship, romantic or otherwise, just any type of relationship, that he's a man that not just refused refused the throne. He had the quick path to the throne, right? He's Aegon
Yeah.
6, I believe, 6 or 7, 6. And
Yeah,
he
not
had the
factoring young Griffin. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
not factoring in the imposters and everything. But he had
Mhm.
the quick ticket, he had the
Yeah.
claim, and he could have been Aegon the Sixth Targaryen, and but he turned that down. But but one thing that I love is that it's not the first time he'd done that. Stannis also
Right.
said, "Kneel and rise again, Jon Stark, and you would
Mhm.
be my Warden of the North," and everything. He's
Yeah.
by that point, whether he realized it or not, when he's Lord Commander Jon Snow is sort of what he had become comfortable being. And
Yeah.
so he's synthesized his all of his aspects, which he's able to pass to Theon in that beautiful scene of you're a Greyjoy and you're a Stark. He passes that
Mhm.
wisdom on, but it is still interesting, with the dragon out in the world. Maybe there's just a literal brass tacks question of someone saying the dragon is out of control. He's only going to listen to a Targaryen, period. And maybe that's Samwell
Yeah.
Tarly, and maybe that's Bran. Um,
Yeah.
because the Valarians are all but destroyed or gone
Yeah.
by this point. So who else but you? It would be an interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's something to it there. And you're talking about trying to create some kind of conflict and everything. Yeah, Drogon could be quite a conflict. Certainly not enough. One of my favorite things about what Jon Snow that Kid said was kind of continuing what you said. Just this idea I want to focus in on here is I think where we leave him at the end of the show, there's always this feeling of like I think we as an audience wanted some kind of little smile that things are okay, and he's not okay. I love that
Mhm.
ending, and I stand behind John's ending too. And I think it's definitely where he was sent. I want to be clear. Technically, I understand. That's what happened. I understand that, but I've always thought that kind of is where he needed to go, anyways, and maybe where his heart wanted to go, which is maybe a little bit of the gift and the curse that Kit Harrington is talking about. But it's so Jon Snow to be not okay. His whole life is not. We meet him. He's sullen. We
Mhm.
he doesn't get to experience Egret being around Mance. There's Jorah Mormont. There's some moments of joy, but he's a heavy heart. He's a heart on his sleeve, heavy-hearted, somber, sullen guy. I wouldn't mind to see Jon Snow smile at some point in this series, and to have part of what he's become is someone who is little well adjusted to some of the things around him, even though he has this burden that he carries on his back. Don't you want to see Jon Snow smile, Alden?
I do, and I think the fact that it's easy to remember the moments when he does is proof positive that it was so rare. Like, a moment that I always love is when John is Lord Commander and he says, "We need a latrine captain."
Yeah,
And then he's like, Brian seems like a good job for a ginger, like, and everybody laughs. Like, one of the few
yeah,
jokes he cracks in the entire show. And I would
yeah,
love to see him reach either by the end of Snow, or maybe by the beginning of Snow, he's
yeah,
cracking smiles because he's come to some peace, and then it's the no, there's a threat. Like, who knows how they play that? But
yeah,
I've always thought it was interesting. Like you said, he had to go there because that was his sentence, but he also needed to. But then also, it was Tyrion and Bran and this council, like, also just trying to get Grey Worm off their back. Like, I don't think that Grey Worm knew necessarily. That's
yeah,
something I've always pointed out about season 8. People are
yeah,
like, "Oh, they just sent him back to the wall," like, and it's like, no, Tyrion set him free because the Westerosi characters know that the wall fell. People in Dany's camp know that the wall fell because that's where Tormund was. That's where Dondarrion was. So it's like the Night's Watch like exists. We see a couple Rangers when he gets there and pets Ghost, but I think that it does that. Does he lead those people north and then turn Castle Black into Castle Snow? Like, I don't know what he does, because that they don't have no purpose anymore. For thousands of years, they've been in order, and then they won.
Yeah.
So it's
I'm wearing my Night's Watch hat, and I just had a sad moment. I was like, oh, he gets to be reunited with Ed. And I'm like, oh wait, no, that can't happen. He'd go to Ed's tombstone and doff his cap there. More comments here. We're gonna get to some of the ghost stuff, which Kit Harrington said. I like Charlie's comment here. I think taking Dany's body away is clearly thematic. Yeah, I agree with that. But in the world of magic and how these characters are so intrinsically linked to by rebirth, I can't help but wonder if we'll ever see her again. Going to the thoughts. I mean, look, there's a lot of ways. I don't think you necessarily need Emilia Clarke as Daenerys Targaryen, but it would be, I think, somewhat of I could see it as a missed opportunity if you don't find some way, dreams, visions, crazy magic. Maybe Piat Pre Jr. brings her back with some,
I was just about to say, like,
there could be a lot of things, a lot of ways, but like Ranger Donald said earlier, the shadow of that character hangs over probably every second of Jon's soul right now.
I mean, if Jon Snow walks into the House of the Undying, or Jon Snow can't sleep, or Jon is having dragon dreams and they're of her, and Jon, all of those things, like there's organic ways, I think, to get Emilia in there without a Red Priestess bringing her back. It doesn't need to be something that literal, but there is still, I think, something to be said for that character. I don't know, and maybe that's why I need another convention, and I need an Emilia panel. I need Emilia to talk about it. I need Emilia, Dan, and Dave to talk about, like, what is she thinking about in her last breaths? Did she, she has that. I think, her controversies aside, and how we got there aside, I think that when she finally gets to the throne, she brings up Viserys the Third and their childhood and everything, and I think that stuff is really poignant. I think she has to factor in. And Kit Harrington also did comment on love this weekend. That was the question: would Jon Snow ever find love again? And I'm paraphrasing. I don't have this one in front of me, but it was communicated to me by our friend who was there, and he said that Kit was saying, "I think that he has too much PTSD for another romance." Which I, as a fan, I agree with that. I think two great loves of two very different phases and times and types of women and types of people and environments is enough. But I think that both Ygritte and Jon have to. I think I've joked before on Casterly Talk, like, maybe Jon, by the time the show picks up, lives on Mount Ygritte. Like, he just named it after her. You can't find him unless you know how to get there. Like, he's just being a depressed boy. Who knows? Ghost has a whole wolf pack that guards Mount Ygritte.
I like what you're pitching here. The tales of Jon on Mount Ygritte there. Kit had a lot to say about Ghost when asked about there. I don't know if you have those comments in front of you, Alden, but some great stuff here that he said. I do think Ghost has a place in. I mean, he's brilliant in the books, and he's such an interesting dynamic. Those wolves are with the kids. I think I think there's, I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm just saying they're very difficult to film. So what I've liked about that is, a lot of people are reading into clues about what the show could be and what they might be working on. I kind of look at that and laugh, as like, Jon's already thinking as a producer, the cost for the wolves is higher than people ever want to kind of realize, which is why Ghost wasn't in the show as much towards the end, as we all know. So anyways, your thoughts on that comment, and Ghost in this show.
Yeah, you just sent me back to raging during season 8 on Twitter, of people yelling at Dan and Dave, "How dare you cut him?" Oh, wait, there he is in the finale, and they get a nice moment. Funny what happens when you just wait for episodes to come out. Which was, that whole thing about it's like, it was the reality of the time. Even between Thrones and House, the money is significantly different. I mean,
my rage moment was, I understood a lot of the things behind it. There's some bigger cultural, social things. I got it. But the fact that the amount of horses in a big battle, it's not easy to pull off, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of time. And there was a reason the Dothraki kind of were used the way they were, both in the story and the reality. It's just kind of the harsh truth about the situation. And so, yeah, there was a lot of that stuff. But again, John already thinking like a producer. Kit, I should say. They're the same to me. It's like Carrie Fisher and Princess Leia, right? Kit and John.
It
They're the same.
is. They
Yeah.
blend together, and I think that's an important note too. Is that him shaping the creative direction? I think that's something I really like. That we're seeing more of. Diego Luna, producer on Andor, Ewan McGregor, producer on Obi-Wan, Tom Hiddleston and Hemsworth produced Loki and Thor. So it's like those. That's something of a creative ownership that I like to see. People have joked for a long time because of the way that young George R. R. Martin looks in old photos that John is his insert character. So the two of them having these conversations about what it would be like is really interesting to me. And it's just it's funny to think about, like, what does Kit Harrington now know about the way that the book version ends? What does Kit Harrington know about what he shot and filmed with Isaac Hempstead Wright and Amelia Clark and everybody came from George versus came from Dan and Dave? And then, then there's the big question of who makes this thing is another thing, because Miguel's out and he's doing his independent projects, and does Condal become the Fahey of the whole thing? I don't know. These are all fun questions.
Yeah, it seems like John has a team with him. Well, I have to look and see some of the other projects he's worked on and the names there. I haven't researched that far there. I love the Jon Snow as George is an interesting one, because I've always Samuel Tarly, the bookish kind of not tough warrior, not that always tracked for me. But I love what you're saying about George R. R. Martin and Jon Snow and that connection, because maybe George is saying, yeah, I just want to go hide out in New Mexico. And I feel all the stuff that I've put out there and all the characters I've killed, are the decisions right for me? And then maybe Kit can find a connection with those two characters, the real life George R. R. Martin and Jon Snow there. Got a question here before we begin to wrap up here, Alden, on this quick little version of Casterly Talk Live. Haskell, thank you, Eddie, for all the support. He always tweets out links to all the shows. He's a big supporter of so many people. We appreciate it. He says, from the time John left Ygritte and they got reunited at Castle Black, any chance they could pull a fast one, saying she realized she was pregnant after he escaped, had his kid, and never told him. And then Eddie follows that up with, or has had too much daytime soap drama option. Yeah, in a way, I could say that. I see that. But it does beg the question, Alden, of not just if John and Ygritte had a kid. I actually wouldn't have a problem with that. But, a show about next generations. This is after the big change. The wheel was reformed, not necessarily broken, or at least they're rebuilding parts of it. The next generation does need to factor in that story for me a little bit as a viewer. I'm never beholden to too many of my expectations. But John Jr., I don't have a problem with that idea. Do you?
No, I don't have a problem with it conceptually. You sort of get into the how much time was there between their quote unquote breakup and then the attack on the wall. Like, you get into really nerd questions about that. But as a concept, John having to become his father in certain ways, his fathers in certain ways, that's very mythic. That's very classic. Having to take up an apprentice, a protege, some young member of the free folk that wants to do X but needs a guardian. Like, there's all types of stuff that you could do. Maybe John finds that ice baby and then we just do the Mandalorian and John just takes him and they have adventures, and I don't know. But the idea of the next generation is important. I mean, Bran is a young king. Podrick's on the King's Guard. Like, Sam is young for a maester. Like, the transitionary period already kind of did start as the show started to close. Even Tyrion's not young, but he's certainly not old. He's younger than the other Hands of the Kings were. And so it sort of does seem like we're at a transitionary time. Queen Sansa as well, she's young. So it's like, how have they decided to break conventions and change things? There had not been a queen of the North. So what does the North look like at this point? What has she changed and done? Those are all important questions, I think.
Important questions indeed. Andy Hodges brings up this one. This is a book character, Satin or Satine, because anytime there's no E on the end of it, but I think of our favorite Duchess Satine. But Satine is a steward of Jon Snow in the books, kind of a book-only character. Ollie kind of did take a lot of the beats with him, I guess you could say. But Andy says, would you have any fan casting for that? Since we missed him in GOT, and that could also take a little bit of that next generation angle with Jon Snow if you wanted to there. So I don't know if you're super familiar with that character, Alden, throwing that one on you there, but any thoughts on that one?
I am not, but if you're asking me, are there young British actors that I would love to throw into this world? Absolutely. There are tons of them off the top of my head. If you've never seen the A24 movie Come On, Come On with Joaquin Phoenix, his co-star is a young British gentleman named Woody Norman, who gives one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. So I pick him just by default.
There you go. I thought you were going to say Joaquin Phoenix, and I was going to find a way to make it work in my mind there.
Joaquin Phoenix, yeah.
Almost done. Any final thoughts on Kit's comments? Anything that I left off the table there, Alden?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything that he said. I mean, of course, there's always going to be internet blowback because he agreed verbally with Jon's choice to kill Dany, and then it's the the whole song and dance of why did D&D ruin X and X and Y and Z, and like we're not here to really entertain that. I have no ill will toward Dan and Dave. I will say though, if I'm going to choose chaos, do I think Dan and Dave would ever come back? No. But do I think that Dan and Dave get a say maybe legally? I mean, it would be interesting, right? Like
I thought about that. Yeah, legally.
Yeah, like legally, like that's a really Hollywoody conversation. Like, do they get a based on characters created by George R. R. Martin, David Benioff, and Dan Weiss? Like that's because they cast this kid. They made this version.
Yeah. No, I'd have to dig into it a little bit. I would love that. I also imagine something coming across their desk and they're just like, yeah, sign off on it. We'll see it. We'll watch it on from our couches. Have fun with that.
Exactly. Is this going to be like executive producer in the same way that like lots of people are like, oh yeah, I produced that, meaning that I came by set, I had a cup of coffee, and I was like, this is cool.
It's like me executive producing our Willow reviews. Here's the password, Alden. I'll take the credit there. No,
it's just this is how you work StreamYard.
This is how you work StreamYard. Just keep Nikki in line. We're wrapping up here, but one of the things that, the headline, that we really want to address was that this series is happening, and again, unofficially official. But some of those news stories, don't believe them yet, as far as how far along they are and what's going on. But also that, hey, the convention itself, the fact that we were kind of expecting the news, but I don't even hold them to the flame that the news didn't come out of it, because that happens. D23 and what was it, 2015, 2016? I cannot remember, but Stuart Beattie was going to be there to announce the Kenobi movie or be part of the announcement of the Kenobi movie of some of the rumors that were floating around town. And literally that did not happen. Like they pulled that back. So
Celebration London 2016, Boba Fett.
Fett. So, don't let's just keep it loose on our expectations on this series and not view it as a sure thing quite yet. But man, we're really excited for the idea behind it. There's a lot that could go into this, right?
Yeah. And honestly, I come back to this, and I could be quoting myself. I could be paraphrasing myself. I stand by this. The day that this was announced, I remember laying in bed, seeing James Hibbard's report, texting you and saying, holy bleep, we got to talk about this. And I remain at holy bleep levels of excitement. Of course I want new, of course I want the Corliss show to make it. Of course I want the Yee show to make it. Of course I want the Duncan Egg show to make it. But I'm sorry, this is my guy. And I am here for the follow-ups. I don't buy into the buzzwords of it's safe, it's nostalgia, they just want sameness, because it's about character, it's about theme. And if you have more to say with Luke Skywalker, Indiana Jones, Wolverine, I don't care. Put Jon Snow in that category too. If you have more to say it.
I'm with you on that. Yes, nostalgia can be a dangerous drug. I do agree with that. And you can tell sometimes when you take one hit too many. I totally understand that. But this to me does not have that at all. I'm with you. There, you have someone who lived with this character for almost a decade who's like, I still think there's more to say. And why not in this world of content just pouring out and also disappearing at rapid rates?
And to not wait is a big thing too, which I've brought up before. Like, it wasn't Kit 20 years from now saying, oh, I think I have one more ride left in me. Like, he took a few years off, and then said, "No, I miss that guy." And I think that like, why should I have to wait until I'm, until 30 years from now to announce Jon as the master character for new heroes? Like, why should he? He shouldn't
Yeah.
have to. And I think that's a fun fresh approach to it, which is something that I think can excite people. Like Breaking Bad ended, and they were like, "No, we're gonna do this Saul Goodman show right now." Like, why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, look, and yeah, let's not forget the greatest spinoff of all time, of course, Frasier, which
That's
people are
correct.
like, what? What? And in many ways, I know people who are more fans of Frasier than Cheers. I'm a Cheers guy myself. All right, let's not talk about 80s and 90s sitcoms. Let's wrap up this show. A lot of fun. We're excited for the possibility because when it comes to these properties we love, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Willow, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, we always like that big what if? What if? And let's answer that with more stories. So we'll see what happens. We're almost out of here. But speaking of Willow, Alden, you, Nikki, you guys have been doing a great job reviewing the show. More people on the way. Who's coming. That does not mean they're legally obligated to show up. Life happens. But who's in the hopper to review Willow with you here on the channel?
Yeah, you can expect to see more of Nikki, of course. You could expect to see Adam Collins, who some of you remember from the movie Trivia Schmodown as one of the world champions, also known as the Coyote. He's going to be joining us. Alex and Molly Damon from Star Wars Explained are be coming on the show. A few other people I've reached out to that I haven't locked yet, so I'm not going to announce, but we've got a fun roster of people that are going to be joining us for this show that honestly has been such a shot of just fun and joy and really cleverness, and it's not going to be for everyone. It's extremely different from some of the stuff that we've covered here, but in a good way. And when we're holiday seasons can be tough, it's nice to have those Wednesday Willow watches. So come join us Wednesday evenings. So far, consistently, we've been good with Wednesday evenings so far, for all three of them, but all two of them rather. 3 episodes, 2 broadcasts. But yeah, join us for Willow. We're going to keep that going. That's an 8-episode season, so we'll have that up until the new year.
There you go. Absolutely. Check it out. I'm enjoying the series as well. Might pop back on for the finale. We'll see where life takes me. For right now, for Alden, for me, don't forget to, if you're on YouTube, links below to follow Alden and his podcast, Octo Radio, Willow as well. You can go to my website, catnapzok.com for more. I think there's still time, maybe for the holidays, if you want to shop. I'm selling personalized copies of my book, Why We Love Star Wars, via my website. Check it out there. All right, my friends, that is it for this week. Jon Snow will wait for you north of the wall. We'll see you next time here on Casterly Talk.